Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Vetiva Breakfast Meeting, brought to you by Vetiva Capital Management in partnership with Frontier Africa Report. Today is Tuesday, the 8th of June, and on our agenda, we'll be having a presentation on the Q1 21 trade report from our economist, Ibukun Omoyeni, and then a rundown of the local equity and fixed income markets, and some headlines from our partners at Frontier Africa. So I'd like to start with Ibukun, who will take us through the Q1 21 trade report. Good morning, Ibukun.
Okay, good morning, Joshua, and good morning, everybody. So yesterday, the National Bureau of Statistics released the trade report for the first quarter of 2021. And according to the report, trade was up by about 40% year on year at its total trade. And this increase in trade was driven by imports. So we saw that imports grew by about 54%. We believe the rise in imports was due to the depreciation of the Naira, as the Naira was weaker than it was a year ago. Also driving import was the Finance Act, which reduced the levies on importation of vehicles and other trucks into the country. So that must have also given imports the leeway to rise. So on the flip side, we saw that while imports was rising, export actually fell by about 30%. And this was driven by OPEC production cut, as Nigeria had to produce lesser than it could actually produce. However, we saw that the factor that actually dragged exports the most was the health situation in India. We recall that in February, there was a religious festival as well as political rally in the country, and that led to outbreak of infectious variants of the virus. So that was what actually led to a reduction in the consumption of refined crude, and as a result, the demand for Nigeria's crude fell. And we saw that from the data that India is the country with the highest trade intensity with Nigeria. And as a result, any slight fall in demand from India would affect Nigeria's exports significantly. So going into Q2, we actually see this health situation playing out as the deficit becomes deeper, considering the fact that Q2 last year was a lockdown, and this year there is no lockdown. Manufacturing activities have resumed. There are no restrictions to labor hours, so definitely there would be an increase in imports. So we could see a deeper deficit in Q2, and ultimately that would affect our current account balance. So that sums it up for the trade report for Q1 2021. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you very much, Ibukun. Next, we'll be hearing from the Global Equity Trading Desk and our head trader, Phil. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Joshua, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We start off in Ghana as we review some markets in West Africa, some equities markets in West Africa. In Ghana, the index kicked off the week on a significantly positive note with a 4.41% index appreciation, which was largely driven by 8.7% gain in the price of in the share price of MTN Ghana, and this was also supported by a 3.45% gain in GCB Bank. Looking at the activity level, we saw a decline in both the volume and value traded by over 50%, as the trades in MTN and GCB were much lower in the session, and this was pretty much in line with what we expected for yesterday's trade anyway. So yesterday's gain of 4.41% further pushed the year-to-date return higher to 39.97% in that in the Ghana market, which is one of the best performing index in Africa equity space currently. Going into today, we expect mixed markets with thinner volumes going through, while demand continue to build in the likes of Fan Milk, Society General Bank, and as well as MTN Ghana. And we believe this should be on the back of potential strong numbers for Q2 as we approach that period. Once again, just to remind our listeners and other investors that for exposure into this market, you can kindly reach out to us at dealing via email at dealing@vetiva.com, as well as also through sales. You can be through our sales@vetiva.com email addresses. So I'll move quickly to Nigeria. The Nigerian market started the week in a slow and negative note, with a 10 basis point decline in the index as expected, and like we rightly noted in our expectation for the session as well. The index couldn't sustain last week's positive drive as we saw mild sell down in the banks, which was led by a 122 basis point as well as 22 basis point loss in the share price of GTB and Zenith Bank. WAPCO also ended the session on the losing side with another 122 basis point loss in that session. Even with the decent appreciation that we saw in the likes of Conoil, we also saw some appreciation in Adova and Stanbic, among some others. The index still closed lower as these appreciation weren't sufficient to pull the market in yesterday's session. It was a slow day, like I mentioned earlier, as the turnover ended the session 6% lower to 1.49 billion. Even as the market continued to trade range bound. I think I must have mentioned it yesterday that we've seen market trade between 1.3 and 2 billion, 1.3 and 2 billion naira as turnover. So we've seen that again play out in yesterday's session. All right, yesterday's loss, which was a 10 basis point, pulled the year-to-date return of the market lower to negative 3.93%, even as we saw a largely negative sectoral performance. We saw just the oil and gas as the only positive, the only sector that closed positive, which was largely supported by gains in corn oil as well as Adova in yesterday's session. Just to mention for some company news, Boa Cement announced a change in the payment date of the 2 naira 6 kobo dividend declared for the full year 2020. It was meant to be June 18. This has been moved to July 9, and the company didn't give any reason for this. So that's just for company news and for information. Okay, then going into today, we expect the market to trade mixed. We might see some cherry picking on names like GT Bank and Zenith that are closed lower in yesterday's session. We also believe we should see sustained buy interest in names like Dangote Cement, Nigerian Breweries, and MTN. We continue to see some level of demand in those three names, while we also expect Seplat to continue to see crosses at between 680 and 685 levels. We believe external factors like improvement in global oil price will also be considered by investors, as well as on the yield in fixed income space in their decision making. We believe these are other factors that should be considered by investors aside company specific news. Overall, market will continue to trade range bound turnover. Savvy investors will also continue to cherry pick decent names in the market. All right, so thank you very much, David, for the equities market.
Thank you very much, Joe. Next, we'll hear from Sheikh Ngu. on the BRVM Stock Exchange. Good morning, Kate.
Hello, good morning. For the 22nd week of trading, the BRVM closed with a slow decrease compared to the last 2 weeks that were on an uptrend. The BRVM composite was not able to maintain its upper trend by closing this week at minus 0.85%. This was mainly led by this trending was mainly led by the counter performance of the two biggest market capitalization, Onatel and Sonatel. This trading week was one of the most timid in terms of transactions since the beginning of month of May, because only 1.2 billion CFA was traded compared to the average weekly volume of 2.1 billion in the last 3 months. In terms of sectorial indices, the sectors outside of BRVM industries and BRVM sector public mostly closed on the red. In terms of individual performance, Sucre Ivoire stock price skyrocketed by close to 40%. The stock has been steadily growing since the beginning of the year, and and multiple investors run through the stock when they heard the projection of Fitch when it comes to the worldwide sugar production in 2021. Indeed, Fitch, the rating agency, forecast that there will be a 2.3 million tons deficit of sugar in 2021. The other player that had a great performance was Cefao Ivory Coast. This was the stock showed a 25% increase in its share price this week. In this case, meaning 53% since the beginning of the year. This was mainly led by the strong growth of the activity of the company. This can be perceived by looking at the automobile park of the Abidjan city, which is being renewed steadily. The other stocks that performed well were Bolloré Ivory Coast with 14.38%, Crown CM 12.5% last week, and Safka Ivory Coast 12%. In terms of the lower performance, Air Liquide realized a bad operation last week with close to 15% decrease. It has been on an upward trend since the release of the Q1 2021, the quarter 2021 financial statements, the interim financial statements. The share price saw its relative strength index reach its red zone, and now investors decided to do a session of their stock over the last week. Consequently, it was in the last 5 days they lost 14%. In second position, Uniwax also had a setback by 10%. This was mainly by all the technical indicators that were reaching a red zone, and and then the relative strength index, which was in a buying mood. So the MACD was far above its normal position, and then we have other stocks like Nouvelle. I just remember this name, Nouvelle Édition Ivoirienne, that lost 10%. Nestlé Ivory Coast, after its strong past weeks, had a setback by 8%. In terms of highlights, there are some they ordered a notice for an ordinary shareholder meeting for Bolloré Ivory Coast on June, and they're expecting a gross dividend distribution of 5.44 billion CFA. Same thing for Sucre Ivoire in June 17, same date, for 882 million CFA. Palm Ivory Coast plans to distribute through their ordinary shareholder meeting 1.76 billion for their 2020 financial year performance. BCC, same thing, for 900 million. CIE Ivory Coast, they issued their annual results showing a net profit by 147%, mainly driven by 8.37 increase in turnover and the control of their operational expenses. In terms of the bond market, it closed this week at a slightly with a slight growth of 0.06%. The market value traded stood at 3.93 billion, mainly marked by transaction of Ivory Coast Treasury bonds for an amount of 737 million, and TPCI for an amount of 2.97 billion. In terms of the money markets, it was mainly marked by the issuance of treasury bonds and treasury bonds by the state of Mali for 40 billion and T-bills for Guinea-Bissau, and they issued a total of 50 billion, and then the market offered a coverage rate of over 340%. Only 31%, i.e. 54 billion, was absorbed by the market. The issue of 6-month Guinea-Bissau Treasury bill was the most popular transaction in this case, which showed a 340% absorption rate. In this coming week, there is an expectation for a total of 160 billion in the market through issuers like Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Togo. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh. Now we'll be hearing from our partners at Frontier Africa. Today we have Temple Ashaju. Good morning, Temple.
Right, good morning, and good morning, everyone. So in South Africa, we know that MultiChoice is a listed company on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And so they just gave a forward guidance regarding their earnings that will be released next Thursday, this coming Thursday, June the 10th. And it is expected that the profits will jump between 30% and 45%. And some of the driving factors that they have identified are the resilient growth revenue, strong cost control, and some of the positive impacts of the lockdown due to COVID-19, which means people were able to sit back at home and watch more of TV, get access to more of other services that they've had. And that's all pulled together, have now kind of shrunk the losses that they've been recording across the countries that they are domiciled all across Africa. So their year-end period is March 31st, and so this earnings is expected very, very soon. Headline earnings per share is expected around 295% or thereabouts. So it's a very big one for MultiChoice, the owners of DSTV, Showmax, and other super sports. In Namibia, Windec Bank has been able to list its first sustainability bond. They were able to raise some 227 million Namibian dollars through private placements, something basically to help them finance sustainable projects in that country. So that has been achieved. Afrexim Bank, we know in Egypt, has just pumped some $600 million into United Bank of Egypt, basically to help them finance small and medium enterprise, businesses in that climate. Then in Ghana, the Bank of Ghana says recently that they are at advanced stage of floating their own digital currency. That's the ECD. The Governor Addison actually mentioned it during a press conference, and then they said that the next phase now is basically to get a few people to carry out transactions with the digital CD on the mobile application. If need be for more improvements on what they've been able to put together so far, they will have to carry that out. Basically, the pilot phase will be able to help them make decision on the readiness of the digital currency program. In Togo, there's a budget deficit. The budget deficit in that country continues to widen. It's now at a negative of 7% of the GDP for 2020. That's going by data that was released recently. We told you last week, specifically, I think on the 28th of May, that Tanzania signed an agreement with the AFDB to get a grant of $140 million. That money has now been released to the country, and that's to basically help them finance the construction of a 50 megawatt hydropower plant in the western part of Tanzania. And finally, Safaricom is now looking to write off some 1.5 billion shilling debts owed by Telkom and Airtel. Now, Telkom and Airtel owe Safaricom for cross network calls, interconnection, colocation, and fiber services, and some of the key core areas of the services that Safaricom renders in the eastern part of Africa. So Telkom, we understand, owes around 900 million shillings, and then Airtel owes around 390 billion shillings. Looking to write off all of these debts, but that has not really been concluded. These are some of the headlines we have to share with you this morning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Temple. We have now come to the Q&A portion of the meeting. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand if you would like to speak, ask your question, or if you prefer, you can leave a message in either the chat box or the Q&A box. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can also leave a comment in the comment section and we will answer your question. It appears that we have no questions for any of our presenters today. So we have reached the end of today's meeting. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you'll join us again tomorrow. Hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Good morning.